All righty, we're recording. You are being recorded. Thanks. And you are being welcomed to River Development School, Building Your Process. My name is Christy Pelland. I work with SheJumps. SheJumps is all about increasing the participation of women and girls in outdoor activities. Partnering with nature, SheJumps creates safe, educational outdoor experiences for girls and women that nurture growth and transformation. In short, we are outdoor play that transforms. River School, which you are attending tonight, began way back with Alpine Finishing School in 2012. It was all about expanding progression from hiking to ski mountaineering and building those steps along the way. By applying that same curriculum to river activities, we're achieving our goal to impact more women and girls, regardless of their geographic location or access to terrain. It's another step to ensure SheJumps programs can reach as many communities as possible, offering unique, thorough, and thoughtful programming. SheJumps River School is presented by Orvis, along with additional support from both Patagonia and Yeti to help advance the number of women participating in fly fishing. Tonight's hosts for River Development School are Whitney Milhoan and Hilary Hutchinson. Whitney, raised on the doorsteps of Glacier National Park, Whitney developed a passion for the outdoors early in life. She spent nearly a decade as a fly fishing and whitewater rafting guide on the Flathead River, working her way through a degree in sociology from the University of Montana. For the past dozen years, Whitney has worked exclusively with nonprofits utilizing outdoor therapies to promote physical and emotional healing, most recently serving on the executive director at Casting for Recovery. Whitney is currently pursuing her MBA with a concentration in healthcare and plans to continue her focus on opportunities and inequities in the intersection of outdoor experience and health and wellness. She lives in the Bridger Mountains with 2 dogs, 3 wild children, and a patient husband. Together, they enjoy fishing, skiing, and exploring wild places. Hilary started her fly fishing career as a teenage guide and teenager in West Glacier, Montana. She guided through college, then took her journalism degree to Portland, Oregon, where she worked in television as a television news anchor and reporter. She eventually returned to Montana to co-own and operate Outside Media and Trout TV for nearly a decade. Today, she's still guiding on the Flathead River and the Middle Fork of the Salmon River and owns and runs a fly shop called Larry's Fly and Supply in her hometown of Columbia Falls, Montana. She is a climate activist with Protect Our Winters. Hilary is an ambassador for Orvis, Patagonia, Yeti, Scientific Anglers, Costa, and Loon. Needless to say, tonight, you're in really, really, really good hands. I now turn it over to Hilary and Whitney for River Development School.
Thanks, Christy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. Hey, everyone. I'm Whitney. Huge shout out to Christy and the whole SheJumps team. This has been such a fun experience and an honor to partner on building this content for River Development School. So thank you all so much. And the biggest thank you to everyone joining both online live right now and watching the recording later. We were just before we started, we were laughing about how I think we're all ready for Zoom to just be over. And now it's summer. And so to come back to your screens at 6 o'clock on a summer night is a big commitment. And so we're super grateful and really appreciate you being here and participating. That said, we do want this to be as participatory as possible. So please use that chat function, the Q&A, throughout the evening. We want to hear from you. If you have questions or anecdotes, if you have stories that relate to some of the analysis that we're going to go through tonight, we'd love to hear from you guys as well. So please jump into that Q&A as much as you're willing. We do have a super broad audience. So I know that of the participants tonight, there are a whole range of experience levels, and we hope that whether this is more of a review or whether these are new things to consider, that you'll be able to find some deeper meaning in some of the content that we're going to go through tonight. So, I shouldn't be trusted with the toggle. So just before we start, this will be a little bit redundant if you've been joining all week, but I wanted to just share our shared philosophy about fishing because it's really what kind of drove how we designed this course. So Hilary and I have a shared philosophy in our fly fishing that is grounded in stewardship first. So we believe that if we commit to protecting the resource first, then it makes us better anglers, it makes us better people, makes us better moms, it makes us better global citizens, and it enhances our fishing as well. And so that's kind of the basis for the way that we approach fishing and teaching fishing. We also believe in angling for all, which just means there is space for everyone here. Fly fishing is not an elusive, exclusive, elite club. We really think that there's room for everyone, all walks of life, all experience levels, all backgrounds in the fly fishing community. And then lastly, and probably most relevant to this course, is we believe in this process of building your journey in fly fishing. And that is really how we designed this content. So in terms of what to expect, this course is a little bit atypical in that we're not doing kind of a typical skills review in fly fishing. We're not talking about casting. We're not talking about specific flies. We're not talking about brands of technical gear to use. All of those things are obviously critically important. And so we've built a resource library for you all in the workbook that you'll get after the course, and would really encourage you to dig into that workbook. There's some awesome resources. So there's everything from a full fly fishing 101 review, online videos and tutorials, online communities to connect with. So online fishing organizations, women's fishing organizations, how to sign up for a local free fly fishing 101 class, everything from conservation and stewardship on down to gear and how to select gear. All of that's built into the workbook, and you'll get a link to that after the course. So we wanted to provide you with those resources. However, in this course, we're trying to really dig into kind of the why. And our goal is to put you into the driver's seat of your angling experience. So the difference being, instead of just showing up and someone saying, use this fly, cast it there, giving you a deeper understanding of being able to evaluate what's happening in that water and why is it moving that way and how does that impact the fish? And then what is your role as a steward and also as a sportsman in all of that. So that's some of the content that we're trying to dig in this evening. So the first night we covered purpose and kind of finding your intent as an angler, as well as the importance of planning and preparation and making sure that you're driving your preparation for any fishing experience. And then last night we talked about reading water and waterway identification, really understanding different fisheries. And then tonight we're going to get into this kind of analysis of risk versus adventure. So really we want to have a conversation about balance, judgment, risk, and adventure in your fly fishing pursuits. So Hill, let's talk a little bit about, the difference in the two photos here and how obviously a different risk versus adventure outcome in these two scenarios.
Well, I think that most people who are watching either live or on the recording crave some sort of adventure at some sort of level. Adventure is so good for us and it does so many things and it's physically very important. It fires up some of the same places in your brain that are also fired up when you get a reward. It's kind of that neuroplasticity, that it does something physical to us that is very important and can't be replaced by a lot of other things. So we know as outdoor people how it makes us feel, how it helps us perform, how, you can even be better sleepers and better studiers and better workers and better family members when you're able to kind of trigger a lot of those great things through adventure. So we know adventure is super important, but also risk is an inherent part of adventure. So risk is super important because it's actually built into the definition of adventure. Adventure is kind of that something unusual and exciting, including hazards and certain levels of risk. So in order to be safe out there, it doesn't necessarily mean erasing every single potential danger. It means being able to deal with risk. So managing your risk, handling your risk is what we're talking about today. So when we look at the picture that we put up here in the presentation, the top one is Whitney fishing with her oldest son when I think he was just 3, Gunnison, out on the river. And this is I believe the first day that he ever caught a fish, and then on the fly. And then the picture below it is me guiding on my regular day stretch on the whitewater stretch on the Middle Fork of the Flathead. And both of those scenarios are a certain level of adventure, and they are a certain level of risk. And there is risk involved in the top picture because you've got a toddler. And so the reason we put that there is because it's not like the top one is just absolutely no adventure and absolutely no risk to manage. And then the bottom one is all kinds of adventure and all kinds of risk to manage. They both are adventures, and they both have certain kinds of risk, because, you know, if adventure is something that's an unusual and exciting experience that can have hazards and risk, the top picture has that. It's the first time that it's happened, the first time that he's been out fly fishing. And that can be obviously very exciting. And there are certainly hazards that come along when you've got a toddler by the water, walking on rocks. A lot of times adventure has to do with a place that's new. And so certainly anytime we're advancing in our fly fishing, we're trying out new things and we're trying out new places. So each of those can be an adventure. And so what we're talking about today is kind of balancing the adventure that we're going to talk about goals and expectations on with kind of risk and managing the risk, or with the balance it with the hazards so that you can manage that risk. So yeah, definitely 2 different pictures, but you can get that same sort of satisfaction that we crave. I mean, it's crazy how much we need and crave adventure, but it is something that's biological. Back when we used to have to get adrenaline because we survived when we didn't die because we got chased down by some wild animal, that's kind of where that comes from. We've got just this drive, and we still have it. And so when we're talking about managing these risks and we're talking about mitigating some of the hazards, we're not talking about erasing all of the adventure. And I want people to be encouraged that we do appreciate adventure in fly fishing for sure. And so this is about being able to get to that point where you can continue to have fun, be successful, and safe.
Yeah. And it's funny, it seems like a pretty obvious, blatant thing. But I think in fishing specifically, this kind of risk analysis is immediately jumped over and as compared to other outdoor activities. And I think part of that reason is because fishing is so accessible. There's so many different ways that you can access fishing and fishing experiences that sometimes the potential risk can be underestimated compared to, for example, backcountry skiing. Obviously, an inherent risk. You're not going to go without your training, your preparation, your beacon, everything that's needed to even participate. So it's an interesting concept to talk about fly fishing and balancing risk, because I think often people just skip straight to the experience because it can be so accessible. So it's kind of like retraining the brain to go back to, whether it's the top picture or the bottom picture, anytime you're going to hit the water, just kind of starting with that baseline analysis.
Absolutely.
So I think, and kind of how we wanted to approach this is to be able to even consider potential risks or hazards definitely has to start with what your goals are or what you want to get out of the experience. And so, identifying your individual goal is what's going to build the foundation for gauging cost benefit, because that's going to be personal and individual. Like your cost benefit analysis to fishing is going to differ based on your goals. So again, here are 2 totally different scenarios. Hill, do you want to dig into a little bit why the goals and setting expectations is so important in this risk adventure analysis?
Right. And we're to the point along this journey where we're setting goals. And by getting to this point, I mean, the very first day that we were talking with this group, we were talking about the planning and purpose. And so there was a lot of kind of soul searching there, because that had to do with trying to be present and trying to understand that finding presence in fly fishing is key, and fly fishing can also help you to be present. So, and then the next day we got deep into being able to understand at a deep level a lot of the tools that were given so that you can engage more deeply in these activities in fly fishing. And now we're at the point where you can, based on what you've learned and how you've progressed, zero in on what you really want out of fly fishing. And this can be what you want out of it overall for yourself as an angler. But for me personally, it tends to be day to day, because some days I just kind of want to go bobber dogging on the lake. And then other days I want a high alpine mountain backcountry fly fishing hike. And then other days I want a class 4 whitewater fly fishing experience. So for each of those, I typically zero in on what I want to get out of that day. And that helps me to identify what I need to do in order to kind of get to that goal. And sometimes, and it doesn't have to be like it's a big fish or like, you know, some sort of wild success that's measured by somebody else or measured by social media or measured by some sort of aspirational image that you've seen in marketing. This is why we're at this point, so that you can measure for yourself what your individual goals might be in fly fishing overall or that day. So in these two pictures, the bottom picture is a picture of my 2 daughters, Ella and Delaney, and our dog, Jolene, in the boat. And this is over a year ago. Ella is practicing her rowing because, you know, she'd kind of built the goal that she wanted to be a guide and she wants to be a whitewater guide. And so a year ago, she really started keying in on getting on the sticks and rowing a lot and practicing. So in this particular scenario, the goal was to get her more proficient at rowing. Her goal was to be better at rowing. Delaney's goal is to be part of the process for her to be better at rowing, and Delaney's out there to catch fish too. And for me, I also wanted to be there for her as she's trying to achieve this goal. So there's risk involved because you're with a new rower. And this is something that as a guide, I feel confident in, but I certainly wouldn't feel confident with her taking out somebody who wasn't Swiftwater Rescue certified or proficient on this boat. So we definitely together sat down and kind of talked about what we want to get out of it. And this also helps us not like go fisticuffs in the boat, get along out there. But we certainly measured certain goals and our adventure hazards and risks, because, you know, we could have also chosen to start her off right in the whitewater, but we chose to start off here kind of in some flat water in the main stem, practicing oar strokes, practicing safety, practicing, you know, everything from what she's going to talk about with people out there and what to expect. So we had a certain level that we were at that point in that specific scenario. The top picture is a picture from Casting for Recovery. And Whitney, I'll let you talk about this one because that is your wheelhouse.
So this is a group shot of women from a Casting for Recovery retreat. Casting for Recovery is a nonprofit that uses fly fishing experiences to promote healing for women with breast cancer. So in this scenario, fly fishing is essentially the catalyst for something completely unrelated to fishing, and ends up being this really powerful tool to bring these women together around something beyond their diagnosis. So obviously different goal collectively and individually. Some of these women honestly were obsessed with the fishing, wouldn't get off the water, were really there to fish, loved it, and will continue to fish for the rest of their lives. Some of these women were really there to connect with the community. And I think we can all probably relate to that on different levels as well. And then everything in between. And so this is an interesting dynamic in terms of goal setting, because some of these women did have specific fishing goals. They really wanted to catch fish. They really wanted to properly handle and release a fish. And that was super meaningful to them. Some of these women, their goal truly was to find a network of support. Some of these women had a goal of finding identity beyond their diagnosis and everything that came along with that. So collectively, they had a goal of coming together in support, and then individually, they each had goals that tied to their fishing experience.
So some of the other goals that people might have in their overall fishing journey might be to catch a fish with their dad, or to catch a fish with their kids, or to be able to do some sort of activity while they're camping, or when they go on a big hike, or to learn something new, or to expand their seasons because maybe they are winter sports enthusiasts and not exactly sure what activity they want to do in a shoulder season or in the summer. Other goals might be for health and wellness, might be that this is something like in Casting for Recovery that essentially has been encouraged for your own personal health and wellness. It might just be that this is something that you picked up later in life and wanted to do your entire life, and now's the time. Or maybe you've been fly fishing your entire life and now your goals are to get better and better. And now you want to go on an extended wilderness trip. Maybe you want to go learn salt and go fish for bonefish, tarpon, and permit. Maybe you want to travel the world fly fishing. Maybe you want to become a guide. So all of these different scenarios are places that you can start to look at yourself and identify your own personal goals. Once you've identified your own personal goals, then you start to realize that you're not the only person out there fishing, that there are other people, and that might be your own team, and it might be other people who are out there who have their own goals, aspirations, and drivers as well. So we talk about team. Certainly in the two pictures that you can see there are two different teams. Your team might have certain expectations of what they want from their day collectively, and then individually, they're also going to have individual goals. And so now you're tasked with a little bit measuring your goals and expectations for the day or for the week or the trip or whatever it might be with theirs. And you might have certain limitations that they don't have, and they might have certain limitations you don't have. And you also may have certain limitations together as a group. Maybe you can't go as a group to certain places. Maybe it's more challenging to fish in a certain area as a group. So that's part of your goal identification as well. Figuring out, what does my team want out of this day collectively? And what do I want out of this collectively? And how can we make sure that we're all on the same page, or at least that we're working together in that day?
Yeah, I think that team expectations thing is huge. And especially I see this with beginning anglers, because you're hungry, right? You want to say yes to every opportunity. So that you want to say yes to every offer to go fishing. You want to say yes to every boat trip. You want to fish new rivers. You want to try new species. You want to learn more, meet new people, grow your network in the fly fishing community. And so I think a lot of times anglers will find themselves in a situation where they've said yes and then realize that the team or the group has different expectations or different goals than align with their own, which is fine as long as you're able to identify those things and and kind of mitigate any potential risk that could come from having misaligned goals and expectations. And I think that is just one of the important things about any sort of progression, in sport or activity or anything that's going to come up time and time again. And like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have diverging expectations and goals, but super important to identify your own goals versus the team goals or the group expectations.
And also to recognize that if something doesn't work out, if the day doesn't go exactly the way you didn't expect it to or want it to, it might have been not just because you didn't put yourself in the right place for that next moment. It might have been a team dynamic. Your team might only have two people in it, and then suddenly somebody just didn't want to fish or wasn't prepared or just kind of wasn't feeling it or didn't show up or something. And then you just have to think about being ready to manage that as well. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So getting into, obviously, we just said setting your own goals, identifying your goals is kind of laying the foundation for this cost benefit analysis of risk and adventure. In thinking about risk, obviously the most tangible are the actual ecological hazards. So let's work through what some of those main potential hazards might be and how that either elevates or lowers your risk.
Yeah, that the hazard is something that can actually do you harm. So in terms of terminology, the hazard is the thing that can cause potential harm. The risk is the measure of the likelihood that a hazard will become harmful, and then also what that harm may be. So first, in order to balance the risk, we have to look at what the hazards are. So first, weather. Weather is kind of one of the most obvious hazards because we're surrounded by it all the time. We're constantly managing weather in our lives, whether it's just going out to the mailbox to get the mail or going on a huge adventure. We're very used to managing that. If you start to look at it as a hazard, it's not meant to be a bummer, like you're like, oh great, now weather's a hazard. It's meant to help you to organize your risk analysis. So when you're thinking about going out fishing, you think about certain hazards that can happen because of weather. It'll help you decide, okay, maybe today is the day that I don't go on the 6-mile backcountry hike into an alpine lake alone because there's supposed to be a storm rolling in. I wouldn't ever go alone anyway. Stop shaking your head. I wouldn't. But at any rate, you're not going to want to maybe do that based on the fact that now you're in this position of trying to balance your risk over the result, which is the adventure, the excitement, the stoke that you're going to get out of it, because now you've identified a hazard that is weather. So we talked about on the first day how to be prepared for things like that. Even after you're totally geared up and you're prepared and you've looked at the maps and the radar and you know all of these things, now we're at the point of looking at weather as opposed to something that is just going to happen. And now we're looking at as a potential hazard. So even after you're all geared up, you now need to look at it as something that you need to decide, do I go? And that's kind of the know before you go that mountain enthusiasts are used to. And this is where we're working, to get the same kind of feeling in fly fishing, where it's like, this could change the trajectory of a lot of things. So weather is key. Terrain is something, again, as opposed to looking at it as, okay, it's super muddy or it's super rocky or there's a lot of scree or I just need to wear my waders because it's a sloppy riparian zone or something like that. If you get to this point where you're ready to get out there and weigh a risk, you can identify terrain as a potential hazard. Is this something that can change the trajectory of my day because it is going to be too challenging to manage over what I'm going to get out of it? So this type of terrain might be something that is going to take an extremely long time, that you might need to spend extra money to have specific gear for, that you might not have a good team who can also take on this type of terrain. It might be whether it's a big mountain climb or getting down a scree field to a river, or just walk wading along a river, or navigating class 4 whitewater river to fish. If you start to look at terrain as opposed to just being out there, now it's a potential hazard. Now you're able to take the next step in balancing risk. Your experience level and the experience level of those around you is a potential hazard. So if it's you want to really do something, it doesn't matter if there's something you really, really want to do. Wanting to do something doesn't help you be more experienced at it. So you might be extremely experienced in a certain level of fly fishing, but not at this thing that you really want to do. And you start to think about that as a hazard. Now you can weigh and balance that risk over the potential adventure that you're going to have. So if you think, not quite ready for this, I don't have the experience level, or I am super experienced in this, I'm totally ready, I can go, that's where you get to that point of being able to balance it.
And just to double down on that too, this comes straight back to identifying your individual goals. So that this experience, when experience or lack of experience becomes a hazard, is when it doesn't align well, usually with an individual goal. And again, that sometimes is because your goal is maybe what social media shows you that your goal should be in fly fishing, or whatever, glossy magazine ad shows you is the pinnacle experience of fly fishing. And so, I mean, we talk about that all the time, which is why we built this course in this way is make sure you're finding your own path, defining your own goals, and not just after the next, trophy grip and grin photo for Instagram or whatever the magazine ad is telling you is like the most aspirational epic experience, and really aligning your goals with your experience.
Yeah, exactly. We did a fair amount of discussion the last couple of days about stream flow. And by now, I'm sure you can identify stream flow as a potential hazard. Again, we're not saying that it's hazardous to go out in certain conditions because that's part of the training that you're building. We're saying that stream flow can and should be identified as a potential hazard based on this training that you've kind of been accumulating, where now you're proficient at reading gauges, that you can read the USGS and translate and understand what it means, that you can apply that to new water to understand kind of when they're talking about certain levels and flows, what that means for that area. And when you get into a new zone, that it's going to be different from yours. So we talked a lot about stream flow yesterday. Now that's given us the tools to be able to say, okay, that is a potential hazard. Now I'm able to balance the risk. So now that I know this about stream flow and that I'm studying that, I'm getting more proficient at it. Now I can say, okay, this is what's happening with the river. This is when I know that I can and should get out there and I want to, and I can go for the adventure because I've been able to weigh this risk based on the fact that I know that stream flow can be a hazard. Access is kind of a cool and interesting one too, because when we talk about access, and we've talked about it the last couple of days, we've talked about the literal accessing the river, but also your stream access and stream access laws. There are certain hazards here that are literal in that it can be, of course, hazardous to cross over certain land that you shouldn't be. And so being able to be proficient in understanding how to not trespass is very key. And we've talked about that in the last couple of days. And then understanding different regulations from state to state and from river to river is super important. And so we know that there can be hazards involved with not knowing those things as well. So you might be in a person-to-person hazard where now you're in a confrontation with a landowner or with a state or local agency or with somebody else who is kind of fighting against what you know about stream access. So understanding that access laws and stream access can be a hazard, not just a river kind of structure hazard, but more like a person-to-person hazard, I think is something that will help you balance risk. And that's going to help you decide where to go, when to go, who to go with, and how to go.
Yeah, awesome. So then all of the hazards, of course, and other risks as well, are going to come along with potential consequences. And when we think about consequences of taking on risk in fly fishing, obviously some of the more tangible or physical things rise to the top, like potentially getting hurt or breaking your fly rod. But I think that there are a lot of other more frequent consequences that are the outcome of kind of a poorly thought out cost benefit analysis. So let's dig into some of what the consequences to a failure to plan can look like.
Right. So when we're talking about the hazards that we just talked about, and we're thinking, okay, like I'm trying to weigh risk and adventure, what are the consequences if I kind of maybe choose wrong, or I just don't let my judgment kind of go down the path that I'm hoping that it does? Well, it can be very simply a bummer of a day. So it doesn't have to be straight up death and destruction. We talk a lot about, as mountain people are talking about weighing those risks, the risk can be so consequential that you're talking about extremely injuring other people and yourself and potential death. Certainly that exists here, but in fly fishing, we also want to address the fact that you may be wasting your time, that you don't have a lot of time. And for women, certainly what we've found in so many different labs that Orvis has done through its 50-50 on the water campaign is that women are very busy. So, you know, we're going to school, we're going to work, we're moms, we're sisters, we're wives, we're aunties, we're volunteering at church, we're volunteering at school, we're getting our MBAs, you know, we're teaching, we're educating others, we're helping out with parents. There's so many things that women are doing all the time that we know how valuable our time is. That's one of the reasons that we've found it can be challenging for women to get into fly fishing and to stay in fly fishing, because there are so many things to do. And we're not super good all the time at granting ourselves me time. So when you get the chance to go fishing, you definitely don't want to be wasting your time. So sometimes balancing risk and adventure is simply to guard the fact that you need to capitalize on your time so that you're just not wasting it. And so that's something that is a consequence of not balancing the risk, is wasting your time. Another consequence is wasting your energy. Is just like, I am too tired now. I'm too tired for this. I'm burned out. I don't want to do this. That's wasted energy. And it's maybe just not your wasted energy, but the energy that other people put into it. And when I'm talking about the energy, I keep going back to what we learned in the very beginning 2 days ago. And then yesterday, all of this stuff is progressing. All of these tools and this deeper understanding, kind of this more thoughtful approach to fly fishing, is energy. This is a lot to put in it. And the kind of fly fishing that we're coaching is, like you said, Whitney, it's not the take the fly and cast it here, push this button and now you're fishing. It's really putting your energy into progressing as an angler, or even if you don't care about progressing, just having a hell of a day, having a great time and enjoying yourself. That's energy to get to that point. So now one of the consequences of not properly balancing risk or identifying their hazards is wasting all of that energy. Certainly injury is huge. When you talked about wanting to maybe like push yourself outside of your comfort zone yesterday, I wholeheartedly agree that we can put ourselves in the best moment to push ourselves a little bit. And as opposed to just blindly pushing ourselves, we can also use this balancing risk and identifying hazards to help push ourselves a little bit outside of our comfort level if we want to, if that's where we want to be. I certainly love to do that. I love pushing myself a little bit outside my comfort level, but because I've gone through this process, I know where that is. I know what that line is. And I don't like getting hurt. I'm far too old to lose a single day anymore. I mean, for me, when I wrecked my knee, it psychologically set me so far back because I just felt like it was such a waste, and it set me back in time. And the knee injury was something that I'm just not willing to go through again. So the balancing the risk to prevent injury is huge to me personally, and something, of course, I think I've learned the hard way, which so much of this course is experiential lessons learned. And certainly disappointment, which is next on the list, is a giant consequence.
Mm-hmm.
You have something in mind and you don't want to let yourself or other people down. And it can be so disappointing when a trip doesn't work out. You know, we're also, you know, have our fair share, probably too much of type 2 fun, when just everything goes crazy and everything goes wrong, or whatever. But ultimately you can tell yourself a million times, that was crazy, that was awesome, everything sucked. It's way more fun to not be disappointed in your day, and to not disappoint others, and just to not feel like kind of that wasn't what you expected.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about the disappointment too, that again, this is like, not to sound like too loosey-goosey about it all, but really, and we see this so often in fly fishing, I would say the biggest consequence is disappointment because of maybe an altered expectation or a goal, the lack of actually identifying personal goals. And so again, then you're drawn to kind of the glossy, aspirational view of what fly fishing should be: super exciting, sexy, beautiful, everything goes swimmingly, and rather than the process of it. And so I think that one's really important.
Yeah. And I think also you had made the point, Whitney, that when you're on a trip and everything goes smoothly, that didn't happen for no reason. That just wasn't magic. That was likely because people identified their purpose and did the planning, and then they dove deep into engagement of the tools, like talked about yesterday, to be able to put themselves in the best moment for the next moment, and then also then worked on their process. They built their process, which is what we're doing now, that they were able to identify hazards and consequences and balance risk. So that all came from somewhere. And so an actual glossy trip, not an Instagram glossy trip, but a real glossy trip, something worked out, was because these things, somebody there was able to put them in play. And it wasn't something they did it because they just went to a conference, a clinic with you and I. These are things that they have built maybe structurally throughout their lives or throughout their fly fishing life.
Yeah,
so what we're trying to encourage people is that that is something that you can start to work on and identify now, if it's not something that you had done before. And that the aspirational Instagram kind of thing, sometimes I call BS when I see a trip that looks like every single thing went well, and I know that maybe that's not the case because I talk to certain people. I don't think that we should be just showing that. I think that we should also learn from each other's mistakes. I think we can also bring up mistakes that we made so that other people can learn from them. Mistakes that happen along the way in planning, maybe not thinking about your goals or what you wanted out of it. Maybe, you just didn't think about the hazards or the consequences and balance the risk. So I think that we hopefully moving forward can also help each other by also talking about the things that didn't work out and what went wrong and how we can fix that. Lost gear is the worst. It's such a bummer to have broken rods, lost flies, maybe like even epic things like a wrapped boat. We see so many of it. There's so many people on the river right now, and we're seeing so many accidents. And it really, really bums me out. It bums me out to see people breaking so many rods, to see boats popping, ripping, smashing, that kind of stuff. I'm just like, oh, this is, this is not just a bang 'em up derby. This stuff is valuable and it's a tool, and it's fun, and we need to take good care of it. And so I think that losing gear is a huge consequence to me of not weighing those risks and not identifying the hazards. So if nothing else, like, oh man, I broke my fly rod, it's going to take 8 weeks to get it back, because I have to has to get fixed, and I have to mail it, and has to get shipped back, and all of the stuff in the middle of your summer. That's not something that you want to have to deal with. Endangering others is very clear, goes along with all of the other things that we talked about. It's not just endangering their physical well-being. It may be that you have endangered your relationship or your friendship because they don't want to go with you anymore, or you don't want to go with them anymore. So this could be something that you haven't thought about before in terms of your team, but there is a consequence to not identifying the hazard and balance the risk when it comes to endangering others. And that can be just that it's not going to work out with them anymore for whatever reason. So think about how much you care about the people you care about and want to fish with. And then that hopefully will be a good motivator to identify hazards. And then the disenfranchisement is just that you're like, I'm over it. I don't want to fish anymore. And that is heartbreaking. A bad realization, and that can be prevented because it's so fun. It's such a good hang. It's such a good life and a career out there. And I think that when people get disenfranchised, it's because they've had so many days of wasted time, wasted energy, injury, disappointment, lost gear, endangering others, and then they're just over it. And what we're trying to do is not bum you out. Now that we've
isn't this an uplifting topic?
Yeah, I know this is a very uplifting slide. This is not what we want to not have that happen. Like It's the opposite of what we want. We don't want people to get disenfranchised, but I think it happens a lot, and it happens a lot with women because we don't want to keep wasting time, wasting energy, getting hurt, be disappointed, losing gear. Like that's not cool with us. And so we can get disenfranchised when we don't identify the hazards.
Yeah. The disenfranchisement, I think, is huge, specifically in the fly fishing industry. So women's participation in fly fishing is totally trending. So on the recruitment end, in terms of how many new women are interested, express interest, give it a shot, drawn to the sport initially, that has been growing year over year for many years and continues to grow. But then when we look at retention, meaning how many women continue on in the sport, those numbers drop drastically. And so I think it really all boils down to exactly what you were just talking about. They have become disenfranchised, either because they didn't find the community, they didn't have goals and expectations, they weren't given the tools to prepare, the resources that are in the workbook and the planning and purpose sessions that we've talked through, or that their goals were not aligned with the outcomes, or maybe they had expectations beyond that weren't personalized. And it's like it really is an ongoing, I mean, this is something that the industry pros talk about, is like retaining women. Like, it's plenty of women are interested and giving it a try, and only a fraction of them are continuing on with the sport. And so I think the disenfranchisement is a huge potential consequence.
Yep. And just can't drive home enough too. It has, in my opinion, everything to do with, if you're told, stand here, cast like this, catch this fish, and none of these other things that we've been talking about this week happen, it's real easy to get disenfranchised because it's not going to always happen that way. And then you also can't go out there and continue your fly fishing without being empowered to understand what's going on in the river and in the fishery and in the ecosystem, and expect to have a good day without knowing those things. And so that's, I think, that disenfranchisement for sure as well. So
totally.
Thinking about what the hazards are and then weighing that risk is going to help mitigate that for sure.
For sure. And now that we've thoroughly depressed and scared everyone, now let's talk about the rewards.
Yay!
So obviously the flip side of this pendulum, of this balancing game, are the rewards that are to be reaped.
Yeah, I think for starters, the return on investment is very clear. And that is not just your financial investment, which is significant. I mean, there is a fair amount of money that goes into it, even if you're, kind of fishing on the shoestring and keeping it as affordable as possible. You do have some skin in the game. And then beyond that pocketbook aspect, you have put all of this time and energy into it. And especially if you've taken the steps that we're encouraging you to take to fish more thoughtfully, the return on investment is better. It's huge. If somebody just says, cast over here, and you catch a fish, you're like, yay, great. But when you really understand where the water came from, what that non-native species has gone through over all of this time in order to be in that place, why it ate the way it ate in the water column, how the weather has changed where you are in this space and time, what's going on with climate, what's happening with the stream flow, how that stream bed has affected where the fly is, what's happening with all those water features like we learned yesterday, and each one of the identifying features on the river that you now understand. It's like that language that suddenly didn't make sense. Now you understand the language and you're speaking the language. Now that fish is like it's so much cooler. It's not just like, ooh, yay, caught it. It means so much more because there was just so much going on. I mean, it was like, now you've got it. And I think that is the return on investment. That's the skin in the game. That is so rad. It's so hearty. It's so great. And it's so rewarding. And again, I talked about how the brain kind of hits a certain point for rewards is the same as adventure. And so really the adventure is a reward. So you get, because you did all these other things and you've gone deep into your process, you've built your process, now you're experiencing adventure. And that is the same kind of adrenaline, and it's the same kind of synapse that's connecting and that's building, that is a reward. It's a benefit. And that's kind of, you know, what science says. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you went revisited that, because I do think, you know, we've heard from day one, we were talking so much about being confident with your skill level, with your comfort level, and then, you know, we've spoken so much about being intentional in, you know, choosing everything from your access to your fishing partners to the terrain, and what I like about what you just said is, certainly we're not saying stay in your comfort zone and just be comfortable. That's like the opposite of what we're saying. What we're saying is take all these steps to prepare, and then press that comfort zone. And that's what will allow you to safely, you know, take new adventures, get that shot of adrenaline, try new things, continue to progress without doing it blindly. And really being able to mitigate that risk. So I think that's great. That I love the way you emphasize that. That's great.
Yeah. The expectations met, I think, for me personally, only happens when I have identified the hazards and then balanced the risk, because I might have lofty expectations. Like, I really want something to happen. And a lot of times it might be a big thing. It might be a big trip. It might be a kind of expedition level, or it might be an epic fish that I've wanted to catch somewhere really, you know, in my mind, something that it is a big goal for me, because I've done kind of my goal setting. And for me, a huge reward is that I met the expectation. And I think, you know, we talked about kind of the consequences, disappointment. The opposite of that is like meeting that expectation. So when I've got a big expectation, I know it's not going to be met unless I've kind of done these other things. And so when it is met, then it's not just like happenstance. It's not just, oh, that worked out, cool. You know, it is very satisfying that you put yourself in that place and worked toward that. And even if, again, I keep trying to say, this might sound pretty mega, you know, that this is really, these things are super intense. All I want to do is like go fish for fun. It's still that you still, you're just going down to the park to fish in the pond and hang out with your kids. If you just want to go, like, you know, drink a couple beers on the lake or whatever, you still definitely run the risk of losing time, energy, money, all that stuff, if you haven't considered these things and if you haven't kind of worked toward these. So, and that, again, I've learned that the hard way. It doesn't have to be super mega and intense like this, but we do these things in so many other aspects of our lives. Why not in fly fishing? It's definitely building your process is huge. So the momentum to continue, I think, is a big deal, because when you have met the expectation, you're stoked. So it's like continue time,
sure.
You know, you've met the expectation, and then it's like, there's kind of that, yeah, let's do it again. I mean, what do you say after you typically slap a high five? You're like, let's do it again. Let's go, you know, let's keep it going. So there's this momentum, and that's a huge reward. When you've got that momentum, then you're going to continue to consider your purpose. You're going to continue to do the planning, and you're going to continue to all those things that we outlined in day one in terms of your gear and all of the tools that you need for the planning. You're going to make sure that you stay on top of those. And then, you know, from yesterday, you're going to make sure that you are digging in deep to understanding, identifying the water that you're on, and then you're going to be able to build your process. So that's the momentum that's going to come from doing it. You know, I won't say right, because we're not here to say what's right or wrong, but doing this, and then it works out, is going to build momentum, and you're just going to want to continue to keep going. And that's how it is for me, for sure. Like, just, what do you think? Like, it works out, and then you're like, not
Oh
saying, oh,
yeah,
let's
for
go do
sure.
something else.
And I
You're like,
just been
no,
thinking
no.
about so much about what we just talked about in terms of, as an industry, fly fishing failing to retain women, to keep women engaged and involved. And I think so much of it is this, like all of those, this like process of success along the way that keeps you hooked.
Mhm.
Hooked, engaged. um, so I think that's huge. I think that you have to have those triumphs. You have to feel good. And that again comes back to having set the right expectations and set individual goals and building the right team and being prepared. But for sure, I think that that momentum to continue is what will allow you to progress, which is your last element here. Is like you're not going to progress unless you have a desire to
Yeah.
do the next cool thing and learn the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that fly fishing again has failed women compared to other activities where there's a more natural progression built in.
Yeah, definitely. But progression is, I think, some people say, well, I don't care if I become a better angler or whatever, but every single time you go out, there's something is being improved,
For sure.
whether you like it or not. You're getting better at it, you're progressing, and being able to have that as an identifying reward, it's like, okay, if I do these things, I'm just going to be better at this. It's definitely going to be easier. Yeah. It's going to be more fun. I'm going to be able to achieve those other things in fly fishing that I want. That's for sure a reward that comes from properly balancing risks and hazards.
And so speaking of progression, obviously, as you progress, that kind of goal risk analysis is going to change and evolve. And as your skill progresses and your goals progress, so will maybe the amount of risk you're willing to take on. The hazards themselves might change. Like all of that's going to shift and grow along with your progression. So how do you balance that, or how do you create a moving target for kind of a risk assessment as you advance in the sport?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you automatically understand that it's a dynamic process, that you are constantly growing and changing, we do that as humans. We're constantly reevaluating ourselves and as we're progressing in our daily lives. Fly fishing is the same way. So when you're thinking about your purpose, you kind of are reevaluating that as you continue to get better. When you think about your planning, you're continuing to reevaluate that because maybe now you've upgraded your gear, you're going on different trips, you're trying different species, you're maybe traveling around a little bit, or maybe you are keeping it tight in your community and keeping it the same. You're constantly looking at your planning. And then when you're thinking about the water that you're on, you're deciding probably not to go in the exact same place every single day or fish it in the exact same way. So you're changing how you're fishing and where you're fishing and when you're fishing and who you're fishing with. And so all of those different changes means that you've also got to look at your hazards and your risks and weigh those in a different way. And that takes a skills audit. So essentially is reevaluating what your goals are. Okay, now I didn't maybe used to be able to fish here or want to go there, or I didn't feel comfortable doing this, but now I do. Now I need to reevaluate what my goal is. Now my goal is to maybe get the Utah Trout Slam or something. Maybe I want to go hike up to this high mountain lake. Maybe now I want to, and we'll talk about this later on, is fish for saltwater species. And so you start to reevaluate your goals. Now you've got to go back and do that again, that risk analysis. You have to go back and look at the hazards involved in this new level of activity that you're at and weigh that against the adventure. Because now you've amped up your adventure probably. Now your skills have progressed. You might have amped up everything. You've got to go do what you did before and, give yourself a little bit of an analysis and weigh the hazards and the risks. And I think that your skills might progress super fast and you have to do this all the time. Or maybe they don't really progress that often, as long as you're giving yourself a little skills audit. But what you don't want to do is to just kind of do this once and then don't give yourself a check-in ever again, because you will get better at it and you will want other things out of fishing. And if you just kind of keep it, where you started, then you're going to leave yourself behind, and you could potentially have all of those consequences happen because you didn't reevaluate your goals and reevaluate your risk balance. Muted.
I think even if you don't want more out of it, the environment around you is still going to change. So for example, we had some feedback from the first night, I believe, from a participant who is like, wow, this feels like a lot, like it feels like more in depth and more philosophical, and so the topic that evening was purpose and planning, how to just be more intentional and inject yourself into the driver's seat of every step of the way, because it will enrich your experience. And I had feedback that said, this seems like a lot. I just, I kind of want fly fishing to be the side hustle. Should I still do all these things, or do I still need to care about stream flow or, water temps or packing or maps, or exactly, can I just, I'm really not looking to progress in fly fishing. And I think, again, it goes back to, even if you never progress, like maybe you fish like once every 2 years with your family, or when you're at the lake, or when you're camping, it still will deepen and heighten your experience. And I think that, anytime we're fishing, it's one of the most authentic ways to have a real connection with the natural world, right? You're literally grounded. You feel the water. There's another life involved. Like, it really is one of the most powerful ways to connect with the natural world. And the more you know about that, all of the steps that got you there, the more rewarding and fulfilling that experience will be, even if the aim is topical, even if it's just for fun every now and then, cast a line, even if you're not looking to progress your skill, I still think that these steps will enrich your experience.
Yeah, agreed. Totally. Yeah. And the team and group is key with that too. That's why we put that reevaluation back down there. You've got to, if you're giving yourself a skills audit, then you also need to consider your team as well. And that doesn't mean like you quiz them and see how good have you gotten by any means. It means if you're gauging any of your own skills progression, then you just need to re-look at the things you've done before, which is considering your team. So it doesn't matter if they haven't progressed. It just matters that you're considering the way you fish and thinking about how you fish, and then going back through that process of looking at your team and deciding how you need to conduct yourself, and where you want to go, how you want to do it, and what you need to do to put yourself in the best place for a good time, or for more skills progression, or just overall success and enjoyment and safety. Yeah. And part of that is, kind of, if you're reading between the lines here, I also mean, if you've decided like you are getting really good and you now want to go into a class 4 whitewater fly fishing situation, you can't just like bring everybody with you who you fished with before if they don't want to, or if they don't feel comfortable, just because you do. Or if you haven't fished in 5 years and your team has kind of shot out in front of you, you need to be able to have confidence to talk about the fact that you're maybe not ready to go where they're going.
For sure. Yeah, totally.
And then we talked about getting into salt. For me and Whitney, I know for you too, like you feel like, oh, I can fish. I can go do this. You have to also consider that putting yourself into a new species situation, an international travel situation, for example, going on a salt trip, it means that you have to kind of go back and go through all of this and understand and verbalize that you're not in the same place that you were when you feel like you progressed in trout fishing? And I'm speaking from personal experience, and I'm not a saltwater expert, and I certainly have to verbalize to the people I'm with, my team, that, hey, tell me this again, and what's the safety situation here, and what am I need to understand about this water? I don't just say, like, where do I put the fly, but talk to me about what's happening with the ocean. Where are we going, and what are we doing? And like, I put the work in ahead of time so that I can have a deep understanding when I get out there. So 1, I'm not a weak link. So 2, I feel confident. And so 3, I can do the thing I want to do. Like, if you're distracted and not present, like we talked about on the first day, that presence is key, because you don't know what the hell is going on, then it's just not going to work out.
You're not doing yourself any favors.
No, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your energy. You potentially could get hurt. You're going to break all your rods. All these hazards. These are things that legit happen because you've made assumptions that you can fish.
Or because you didn't have confidence in being honest about your skill. And that's something that we've talked about this comes up all the time. And you and I talk about this a lot, but this is, I think, one of the most important aspects of skill progression, is being able to articulate what you know and you don't know. And so, for example, something I do all the time in my local fly shops, like on my home water, is I go in and, talk to the fly shop pro about different fly patterns, and I might know it's hopper season, which pattern has been working best in which size. And he's like, yeah, and then throw on a copper john dropper, instead of just saying, okay. I say, how far, how deep is that? Like, exactly how far should I tie that dropper on? Or if someone suggests that I fish a streamer, I say, how should I fish it? Should I dead drift it? Should I strip it? And so the more specific you can be about the tools that you have, the tools that you need, what you know and what you don't know, it really is, that's what's going to advance your skill more than probably anything beyond practice.
You missed a point in there, Whitney, when you said, but how far should I make my dropper? How long? You don't actually do that. You don't just say, tell me how long to make it. You're asking where in the column the fish are eating. That's the thoughtfulness. Like,
totally.
Don't tell me to make this 18 inches long. It's like,
why is it 18 inches long?
Yeah,
totally.
So we've got fish that are starting to get suspended in the water column, or you're going to have to full nymph rig down deep because the fish are on the bottom. And I've heard you do that in fly shops before, and I don't ever hear you say, tell me which button to push.
No, like, where are they?
Yeah. It's like, there's a deeper thing about, like, what's going on with the fish right now. Oh, they're cold. They're trying to conserve energy. They're way on the bottom. You've got a deep nymph rig. Or, well, they're suspended. They're going to be anywhere in the water column eating kind of like emerging caddis. They're eating mayflies, whatever it might be. You understand what that means because you've put in that work to understand what it means when fish are in certain spots in the water column, when bugs are emerging. I mean, that's the stuff that goes deep into what we're talking about. It's not that we expect people to be entomology experts. What we're trying to encourage is that, there is so much deeper
why
going on. There's a why, and I think the more you can ask the why, I don't think, like, I wouldn't expect people just to go in a fly shop and understand every single piece of terminology, because how would you? You just can't. It takes time and it, in practice. But I think if you can kind of get into your mind that there is a why, ask the why.
For
just
sure.
Think about, not just tell me what to do, but why do I need to do that? Because there is an answer, because they will say, because there's an emergence happening, this is why we're saying, to go nymph with the big salmon fly nymphs in the morning by the rocks, because there is an emergence happening, and there won't be flyers until 1 p.m. Not just here's a salmon fly,
Yeah, I guess that's a great point, and really kind of the meat of how and why we built this whole course. And if there is one single takeaway, it would be stop and ask the why. Every single thing, with every single step along the way. If you're learning to cast, what's the why? What does that stop at the top do? Like what makes the line shoot out from your rod that way? Like, be sure to just stop and ask the why at every step. And that actually is building your process. Like, that's going to be a huge part of exactly what we're talking about here. Yeah.
It doesn't
So
even
just
have to be asking. Oh, sorry. I was
no, you go.
It doesn't even have to be asking. You're in a discovery. You know, we talk to people about like keeping a journal and stuff too. It's not a bad idea to jot some of this stuff down, your own why questions, and go after kind of your personal discovery.
Yeah.
In terms of building your process, you know, I have a system and a program and like the literal things I do. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. That could be a cool another program we should do sometime about your literal process and program. But building process is, we're talking about the big picture of understanding your purpose, your planning, getting deep into the tools that you've been able to gather, been given or learned, and then balancing risks and rewards. And that's your process that you're building. Like it's the coolest thing when you've got to this point that you're like, you know, the complete angler.
I'll let you know when I get there.
Yeah, right. It's not, I laugh because that's aspirational. I hope people understand too. This is ongoing all the time. I mean, it's just about being a woman. That's being a person. It's just being a planetary citizen. It's not like any of these things are going to make you a complete angler, but it will help with your fun, your safety, and your success.
For sure. Awesome. Thanks, sis.
Yeah.
So just as we near the end of our time, would honestly love to hear you survivors that have hung on online. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for putting up with us. And some of you have even hung on all week, which is just so commendable. But honestly, we'd love to hear any questions.
Recording.
Yeah, right. We'd love to hear any questions that you have, not just about balancing risk and reward, but kind of this whole concept of what it means to build your process and why we cultivated the content this way. So we started on Tuesday talking about finding your purpose and setting an intention in your outdoor experience, in your angling. And then from there, getting into the driver's seat of the preparation. So learning about the tools you need to start fishing, learning about the environment, learning about the fishery itself. We moved on yesterday to talk about reading water, waterway identification, understanding where fish are and why, and what that means to your success, and also what that means for fish health and your own safety as well. And then tonight, just wrapping things up with kind of building identifying personal goals, recognizing team expectations, balancing risk, mitigating risk, and then still being able to kind of push the envelope and seek adventure. Let's see here.
So we have Heather is in the chat and saying, on multiple occasions, I've gone to fly shops with my husband and asked questions, and the dudes that work there answer my questions directed at my husband and are super dismissive. Yeah. Shout out to Grizzly Hutchinson. How have you navigated those kinds of experiences?
Yeah. So Heather, this is like so common still. And part of it's disheartening because, you know, Hilary and I have been in and out of fly shops since we were teenagers. And there are a lot of different things happening here. But one of the things that I will say is we still hear this a lot. It certainly is still an ongoing problem with fly shop culture. But one of the things that we talked about, I can't remember if it was last night or the night before, but there's kind of this weird dance happening oftentimes with women in fly shops where it can be intimidating for women to go to fly shops, and they're often not feeling super confident or sometimes not sure what to ask. And so it kind of creates this awkward communication on their part. At the same time, with more and more women in angling, more and more women on the river, more and more women in the fly shops, the fly shop employees are also kind of in a weird place where oftentimes they don't want to make assumptions. They don't want to assume, you know a lot or a little. They don't want to offend you. They don't want to. So they are also kind of stuck in this kind of place of unease. And so then there's two parties doing kind of this awkward dance, and it seems ridiculous, but I will tell you from an industry side, this is something that collectively fly shop culture has been trying to tackle and address for decades.
Yeah.
And so I think you're doing it all right. You're asking the questions, I would say the best thing you can do is ask specific questions. So whether it's, whether you're looking at a certain rod or whether you're asking about local conditions, and that's where a lot of what we've been talking about this week comes in. Go in with what you know. Say, hey, I looked at the stream flow. What do you think that means for this? Or what do you think,
She's also saying, like, she's asking the questions and he's turning and talking to the dude. And that's like,
yeah,
part of it, Heather, in my personal opinion, as a fly shop owner, is sometimes we just need to work on basic customer service with people who work in the shop, because like that is just basic rude. Like, whoever asks the question needs to get answered. You shouldn't be just turning to the dude. And I know what you're getting at, assuming that you don't really want the information. He does, and he's the angler, and he's gonna help him. And I think to a certain extent, that it still happens, and that can be true. But ultimately, we in retail need to be really good at answering questions, and just need to work on good old fashioned customer service all the time, because that particular shop person might not feel the same way, might feel just like, I'm just awkward. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to put my hands. I might not, whatever, but it comes across as just being a jerk, and makes women not want to go in there. And
also, I was just going to say, that's how you lose patrons. I mean, there are plenty of other great fly shops in Missoula, like it's not really also your job to make it easier or less awkward for them or him either. If it becomes a thing, if it's happened multiple times, I honestly probably would not go back to that fly shop.
Yeah. But I also would straight up talk to him about it. You address it, like, the second the dog pees on the rug, put its nose in it. We can't, only just be talking about it later as women. This is a bigger systemic thing, in my opinion. We have to be verbalizing and talking about it openly like this a lot. I will say, when I'm in the shop working as a fly shop owner, and if I have male workers in there as well, lots and lots of men and women just come up and ask my male counterpart the questions. They're not asking me which flies should I use. They immediately go to the man. And so this is why it's maybe even just bigger than that fly shop. A systemic thing is just like making assumptions that the women don't know, haven't been properly trained or whatever. So, it happens on the other side of it too. I've got, great woman who works in my shop, Kirsten, and she is so knowledgeable and excellent. And it happens to her all the time. If one of the boys are in there, people come in and they immediately go to the man and ask the question. So even, and the men will automatically say, oh, Kirsten's got you covered. Yeah. They'll say, oh, she'll help you, and so it's kind of just training society also.
Which sucks, because that's not, that's disheartening and disappointing. And like I said, been like, it is systemic. Like so at all of the industry trade shows, they have, all the leaders of the industry do all these roundtables to talk about the most challenging things in fly fishing, and this actual issue always comes up. It is always one, and it ties into retaining women. Like, this is one of those disenfranchisement things where that happens enough. That's so discouraging, and that's why we're not able to, to encourage women to stay in the sport.
Yeah.
So,
but to answer, Heather, to answer you super clearly in the question, how have you guys navigated those kinds of experiences? When that's happened to me way in the past, I'd blow it off and I'd just be like, dude suck, whatever, but that's not what I do now. So now when that happens to me, and it still does, I continue to ask questions there. Like, I'll even just kind of step up, step in front, and just kind of continue to ask questions. Or if I don't want to make it awkward, it's worth a phone call later. It's worth a call. And it sounds like very Karen-y, talk to the manager, but it's not like that. It's more just like continuing to talk about, hey, I was in your shop, this happened, I just want to let you know. I'm not complaining, I'm just letting you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
She says, super great to hear. You're definitely not the only one. And I think that's a really good point, is the safe environment.
Mhm.
I totally understand what you're saying. Like, here we are telling you, ask all the questions, be specific, put yourself out there, be confident.
Right.
And I totally understand the flip side of that is it's nearly impossible to do that if you're not in an encouraging environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one tactical thing that I would say is specific questions. Go in, with what you know, and ask something specific and tangible. And then it would be awesome too if your husband, like, pre-funk with him first and be like, hey, if this happens, you got to flip it back to me and, have my back. That'd be like, you guys go like good cop, bad cop on it. Good cop,
Yeah.
good cop. I don't know.
Well, I also think too, reward the shops that do it right. So when you feel that you've gotten great customer service, when you feel empowered, when you feel like your questions are answered, when you feel like you got that fly shop experience that you wanted out of a shop, then, tell everybody, like, get people. They want people to come into
For
their shop.
sure.
They want women in there. They want anglers to progress. They want what you want, in my opinion, as a shop owner. It's sad truth, but like, I've gotten a lot of business from people who have come in basically in tears saying like, the other shop was terrible to us. And I don't want that. I don't want any fly shop to be bad to somebody. I want this rising tide to float all boats. I want all shops to be great. But to hear those stories told, it just makes us want to be better. And so I think rewarding the fly shops who are kind of doing it right and telling people about it, I think is a way to help that rising tide.
Yeah, good point. Good question. And like I said, I'm bummed. I'm sorry that you experienced that. And I'm also just disheartened that we hear it so often. It's such a bummer.
Aaron says, I definitely wait to chat with one guy at the fly shop. The rest have all talked down to me repeatedly. That sucks. I hate hearing it. But that's a strategy that I think is maybe a little bit of a long game, but will work, because when you have somebody who you love to work with, that's another way of kind of rewarding that good behavior, is like, they've got a great customer in you, and you've built a relationship based on their good behavior, and you don't have to put up with the other guys. You don't have to. If you found somebody you love to work with, I think that that's fair. You shouldn't have to put up with that. I think it's fair to talk to the person, but it's also worth mentioning to the owner that, hey, I like to work with this guy, and here's why, and tell everybody else, this guy is awesome. I love working with this guy because he answers my questions. Like, he gives me new information. Like, he likes to, share stories, whatever it might be. If you tell other people and you kind of reward that good behavior, then hopefully like that will help bloom it among the rest of the team. Hopefully. I hope so.
I hope so too. And also, you guys just like keeping on. Like, it's just, I mean, it is a bummer, and it's hard. It's hard because what we're trying to do, like what this whole approach to fly fishing, like forcing your way into the driver's seat of your own experience, this is not the way the industry has invited women to play, right? So it is uncomfortable and it is hard, and it does feel like more responsibility than should be put on new anglers that are trying to learn and trying to progress. So I would just encourage you to find your community, find your people. You know, SheJumps obviously does an amazing job of that, but there are also, you know, lots of other awesome fishing organizations that build
Orvis,
really strong communities.
Shout out to Orvis stores. I know, and because I've done the training and I've seen it, and Whitney and I both know firsthand that training inside Orvis stores in terms of being sure that women's questions are answered and that we're treating people with respect and kindness is absolutely something that happens. So I will say I encourage you to frequent the Orvis stores or Orvis dealers, because like that's something that legit happens. Like we've done, it's a real thing. It's real training that we do. So.
Yeah, totally. A question that I think we missed from Madeline earlier. I wasn't able to attend the other sessions. They sound great. When will the recordings be available? So I believe that the recordings will be sent out after this final session. However, I know that each one was separate registration. So I'm not sure if you can get if you had not registered for the other two prior, if you can still get the content. Do we have a SheJumps team member
Christy,
who can help us? Oh, there she is. Hi.
Hello. Yes, we will have them together as a bundle available.
Oh, sweet. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
So then each one's a different link, but they all come together in their email?
That is going to be the plan when it comes to purchasing afterwards. We'll have that all follow up in the combined email. Yes.
Awesome. And thanks, Madeline. I think you will, if you enjoyed the content tonight, I think you really will like the first two. It was totally kind of meant to be a progression. So I hope you'll be able to watch them all.
Yeah, hopefully it'll kind of all make sense. We talk about just like learning this language, the deeper language, and it just, I personally feel strongly about it because I think it's enlightening. I think once you have this thoughtful fly fishing where you're really understanding what's happening out there, as opposed to just do this and do that and go here and go there and don't go here when and don't go there then, go here now. It's like the why. And so all of this is meant to be a deep dive into your journey to answer the why. Double rainbows.
Totally.
What does it all mean?
That's next time. But thank you all for hanging in there this whole time. We really appreciate it. We are very excited about this content, and we hope that you are too. Christy, thank you so much for the opportunity. I have loved partnering with SheJumps and love what you all are doing. You're already answering the why for so many girls and women. Yeah. And so we're just psyched to be a part of it.
Oh, well, all of our team and our entire community, thanks you all for bringing it to the table, because this is, I don't think you all realize just how like game changing this information is and thinking about fishing in this way. And these two women have definitely taken it there, not only for SheJumps, but for the industry. So thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
It is a little turning things on its head. And I think it takes wrapping your head around it when you turn something on its head. And I'm just psyched to be able to do it with you, Whitney. And also thank you so much to Orvis, because I mean, talk about empowering women. They, they believe in this content and thoughtful fly fishing and getting into the kind of the deeper why as a way of empowering instead of just, telling women to go do it. I think that they really are inspiring in terms of encouraging this kind of
for sure.
So yeah.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Be on the lookout for much more from these two. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.